You've picked up Path of Exile 2 and you've chosen who will be saved from the noose. What now? Worry not, Exile, I'm going to guide you through Act 1, all the bosses, and my tips for running efficiently. This guide is both suitable for League Star and rolling new characters. First thing to do when you wash up on the Riverbank is choose your movement type. I go with WASD and I suggest you do too. It feels so good once you get used to it. Very soon you'll come across the Wounded Man. He'll tell you to seek out the Miller shortly before being eaten by a zombie. Once you've dispatched this, you'll get your class's default weapon type. In my case, a quarterstaff. Press I to open your inventory and drag it into its slot. Okay, let's get straight to the important bit first. Items in this game are so extremely important when you're leveling. Right now, you haven't got many clothes on, and that leaves you vulnerable. I am going to suggest you completely clear this river area if this is your first character in the league. Otherwise, you just need to get your first skill gem, which is located in a chest in this area. If you're the archer, you will also have a second chest which will contain your quiver. Once picked up, press G, drag it into one of the gem slots, and then drag its icon over to your taskbar. You will need to use the skill once to continue with the tutorial. Do note that these red things with yellow feathers are really dangerous. I didn't get many on this run, but if you do get a ton of them, you might want to actually avoid them. Don't worry about using your flask charges. These will replenish when you reach a checkpoint. There is one just before the boss at the end of this area. Do remember to equip any items before starting the fight. It'll make it so much easier. Enter stage right, the Bloated Miller. He's currently trying to saw through the outpost defences. You need to stop him. And a word of warning. If you came from Path of Exile, you cannot treat this guy like Hillock. He is way more dangerous. You're actually going to have to watch what's going on and dodge his attacks. Hitting him with a stick repeatedly while standing still just won't cut it. With the exception of his base attack where he just swings his saw around randomly, this boss has three main mechanics. The first is he charges at you. If you're in front of him, you can get pinned up against a wall and stunned. You want to try and avoid this if possible. This move, as far as I can tell, isn't telegraphed, so you'll have to dodge roll away the moment you see it happening. The second attack, and this is the one you really need to be careful about, is the one that is telegraphed. It's telegraphed both by a red flash around the boss and a large exclamation sound. This is a Sunder attack. He'll hit the ground, sending a shockwave out straight in front of him. This hits for a very large amount of damage, so you do not want to be in front of it. If you keep getting hit by these, you will run out of flash charges and you will die. The attack lags behind the telegraphing by about 1.25 seconds. Do wait about 1 second before using your dodge roll. Also, don't dodge away from him, dodge across the attack. That's to say that if you're stood in front of him, dodge to the left or the right, not directly away from him, or you'll still get hit by the beam. The final notable ability is he creates a black cloud around him which spawns adds. These can be very dangerous if you allow enough of them to crowd around you, so you do want to pick these off while trying to kill him. In this fight, your auto attack is going to be your friend. In all character classes I've played, which is 3, the auto attack is way stronger than your other abilities early on. It will also generate combo points which most of your abilities don't. And this applies the whole of the way through Act 1. Sometimes your auto attack is actually better at killing the endgame boss than your actual abilities. This of course can be more dangerous for melee type characters, and so you've got to do a trade-off between how quickly you need to kill him based on the damage. Standing in front of them is not necessarily the safest place to be. That's not to say that you should completely ignore your abilities. I'm using my lightning hit here every so often to try and shock the boss. If I shock him, he takes more damage from my basic attacks. Once he's down, pick up all his loot and head into town. Talk to Renly and get your first level 1 uncut skill gem. Right click it to open the gem cutting screen and engrave the gem you want to use. Do note that only gems that you can currently use based on your attributes, level and weapon are currently highlighted as usable. More gems will become available as your character progresses. This is Path of Exile and you are not limited to the gems on the screen that is currently shown to you. You can click all gems in the bottom left, which will show all gems that your character can currently use. You can also fit a second weapon into your weapon swap and open up new opportunities. Tapping the X key will swap your weapons. This isn't as clumsy as it sounds if you're actually using skills. The game will automatically switch as you use different skills. Once that's done, grab any quests and head out the door to Clearfell. If this is not your first character, then do check the vendors and the gambler, Finn, to see if you can pick up any cheap upgrades. If you are at League Star and somehow have enough gold, then please give me some of your luck. Okay, in Clearfell now, we're going to run up the left-hand wall, and we will either come to a waypoint or this little encampment. The encampment spawns here far more frequently. Check out the abandoned stash. If it doesn't drop a skill gem every time, it's certainly got a very high chance of doing so. If you do have the waypoint variety, then grab that and the checkpoint. Now head northeast at about 45 degrees until you come to a white mound covered in snow. You'll probably hear it before you see it because there's a witch on the hill singing, and not in a good way. This is Beira of the Rotten Pack, and she's a mini-boss. Ending her will drop an item which will give you 10% cold resistance. You do want this. This mini-boss has quite a lot going on, but you only need to care about 2 of her moves, the rest of them do negligible damage. The way I prefer to fight this boss is go in first before she starts really attacking with an auto attack. Then I'll move around her in a circle, shooting her from a distance. You can leave the boss area at any time to replenish charges if you need to. The boss does, however, have energy shield, and so she will replenish that while you're away. Her life will not replenish. The most dangerous of her 2 attacks is where she draws either little runes or big runes on the floor. These throw spikes out of the ground that cause a large amount of damage. You want to avoid these. Her other attack is she'll say something like feed, draw a load of spikes towards her, and then explode outwards, spawning a load of wolves. These wolves are actually quite dangerous when you have no gear, so do feel free to leave the arena to pick them off. Once she falls, she'll drop the head of the Winter Wolf. Right-click this in your inventory to apply a permanent 10% cold resistance. Head upwards and hug the wall, following it to the right. Grab the checkpoint to the Grelwood as you pass it and continue going around the wall. You'll eventually come to the waypoint or the encampment. Grab the checkpoint and right-click on it. This will allow us to teleport to the Grelwood exit, which we're going to do now. In we go. Do be warned that tile sets in Path of Exile are randomly generated. Positions of things can change based on randomness or after a patch. We also haven't had enough time in the game so far to make sure I've hit every random scenario. Some exploration may be required if you hit a scenario that I haven't hit yet. The Grelwood. There's quite a lot going on here. There's 5 different things we need to find. There's also not a clear pattern about where things are here. However, the first 4 of the 5 things are located somewhere in the centre of the map, i.e. not around the edges. The first of these is Ariana's hut. If you already have medium life and mana flasks, you can actually skip this encounter. Otherwise, head into the hut and you'll find this witch in front of a cauldron. She will immediately teleport out of the hut. This boss can be quite challenging if you're melee, as you'll keep having to move away from her. She keeps putting these elemental circles on the ground around her, and they do a lot of damage when they explode. She's also quite hard to hit because she teleports all over the place. And just to make things more awkward, she slows you with this cold beam from her mouth. This does quite high damage over time. If you have any ranged skills, I would suggest you keep your distance and use these against her. The next point of interest is the Grim Tangle. This is a mound with an exit to the area. It's surrounded by yellow glowing mushrooms that explode if you touch them. We want to enter this area, grab the waypoint and come straight back out again. The next thing we want to find is the Tree of Souls. This has a waypoint near it and a guy hanging in the tree. Just summon Una, talk to her, and then we can be on our way. The mini-boss in this area is called Brambleghast. You'll find him in an American football or rugby ball shaped area with 2 entries at either side. This is surrounded by brambles. This boss is fairly easy. I actually kept him stun-locked or frozen pretty much all the way through the fight. Basically just keep moving, move from side to side, shooting him with a ranged skill. He has 2 attacks where he summons vines. In one of these, 2 large vines appear with large chaos orbs on top of them. These slam the ground and do massive chaos damage. You want to use your dodge roll to get out of these. In another one, he'll summon several vines, all of which let out little chaos orbs that follow you around the arena. When they touch you, they'll start an explosion sequence and stop moving. So stop briefly, let them start flashing, and then run away. They'll all explode in the place they were when they touched you. None of these happened in this instance of the fight because I did keep him frozen. The last thing we need to find is the exit to the Red Vale. This is always around the edge of the map, and I've had more luck finding them in either of the corners. I would start looking on the right hand corners first because this is mostly where they spawned. Go in and grab the waypoint. If you haven't found all the points of interest in the Grelwood yet, then do go back out there and finish those before continuing. If we're all done with the 5 points of interest, then we can take a waypoint directly back to Clearwood or go via town. Right near the waypoint, there's an entrance to the Mud Burrows. Just head straight in. Near one of the checkpoints in the Mud Burrows, you'll find the boss, the Devourer. This is a large subterranean worm that goes under the ground, comes out occasionally and attacks you. The head of the worm is where most of the damage comes from. I use my standard way of dealing with early game monsters here and just attack from a distance, going around in a circle. Most of the time the head will just be firing slow red projectiles at you. These are really easy to dodge. When you hear the exclamation sound, one of 2 things will happen. One is he will slam his face into the ground and try and crush you. Do not be under the face when he hits the ground, it does massive damage. The other is he'll fire chaos projectiles at you really quickly. You want to stop attacking while he does this and just move away quickly. Once he's below 50% health, his tail will also start to do a melee attack when you're near it. Stay as far away from this as you can. He does have a couple of ads that look like isopods. These don't do an awful lot of damage and you can normally one-shot them. The only other move of note is sometimes when he's underground you'll get a red flashing circle on the ground. This indicates that he's about to shoot out of the ground at that location. Do not be there when he shoots out. Once he's down, back to town. Take the waypoint back to the Red Vale. In this area we've got to find 3 monoliths. As a general rule, if there's a river near the entrance that runs down the map, there'll be a monolith on one of the 2 sides or both of the 2 sides of that river. 2 of these monoliths will always be on the side of the map left of the river. You'll know you're getting close to a monolith because there's like a hissing or whispering sound that occurs when you get close to it. They're also always located near a checkpoint. The first 2 monoliths just spawn a load of adds. Just finish these off and the monolith will drop the parts that you need. The 3rd monolith spawns a mini-boss. As far as mini-bosses go, he's a bit of a pussycat. He has some candles in his right hand. When these start to spin, he's either going to shoot something out in front of him, so get to either side, or he's going to spawn a load of adds, just kill them. Once you have all 3 pieces of the monoliths, you can just port back to town and then speak to Renly. He'll turn the pieces you got from the monoliths into rune spikes that you can then use in the Tree of Souls to free the Hooded Wan't. As I mentioned, gear is so very important in the early game. If you cannot get the vendors to sell you anything good, then you can upgrade your weapons with the currency that you've collected so far. Here I'm doing it on my staff. And with that, it's off to the Grelwood. Right near the waypoint, you'll find the Tree of Souls. There's 3 rune markers around the tree's root. Click on these to activate all 3 of them. This will free the Hooded One, talk to Una, and she'll take him back to town. You then need to follow her back to town and talk to her. Waypoint back to the Grim Tangle and summon Una. She will sing at the vines blocking your path and scare them away. I honestly didn't think her singing was all that bad. You'll now find yourself in a subterranean maze. There's those yellow mushrooms we found on the surface. If you walk over these, they will explode and leave a damage over time on the floor. Most monsters you kill will also leave a damage over time on the floor. Eventually, you'll come across this area's mini-boss, the Rotten Druid. He can teleport himself around the arena by wrapping himself in vines and then reappearing somewhere else. He also fires projectiles and can summon vines to attackers. While these are out, keep moving. When you hear the exclamation sound, he's going to throw a rock at you. This will one-shot you if it hits you. It also takes about 4 seconds from the exclamation sound before you get hit, so don't roll away immediately, wait till you see the rock flying towards you. Every so often he'll pull up a large circle around himself which will persist for a second or 2. You want to get out of this because it teleports you into the mushrooms at the centre which will all explode. This is really all his dangerous attacks. Once you kill him, he'll drop a load of loot, pick it up, and then continue onwards until you find the exit to the Cemetery of the Eternals. Once in here, grab the waypoint and talk to Lachlann the Lost. In this area, we have not 1, not 2, but 3 bosses. The first 2 boss fights take place in the Tomb of the Consort and the Mausoleum of the Praetor. Both the tomb and the mausoleum share similar tile sets. These are indoor stone mazes, and I haven't found any pattern that indicates where you will find the boss fight. Both boss fights take place in a big rectangular arena, and I believe the bosses were at one point lovers, but I didn't really read any of the text, so I'm only guessing there. But they both play a part in each other's fight. First, we'll cover the Consort's fight, Asiana. The first ability of this boss is to draw 4 large circles on the ground. If you're still in these when they detonate, they cause a massive amount of damage, so you want to prioritise getting out of these as quickly as possible. In another of her abilities, she calls to Draven. This creates little cages on the floor with little spikes causing the barrier. You want to combat roll out of these. I did have trouble on some characters combat rolling out. If that occurs, just find another area to roll out of and try again. After a little while, if you're still stuck in the cage, meteors will fall from the sky and you will die. Her ultimate attack, which doesn't have a lot of telegraphing and really does hurt, is where she throws a load of projectiles out of herself around the arena. I have died to these more than any other of her abilities. Looking back at the footage, I believe that the ghosts that are drawn to her, when one of them touches her, it gives her a chance to roll that ulti. I could be wrong, but that's my working theory at the moment. In general, fighting her, I prefer a ranged attack and just circle around her. Do remember to break off what you're doing for the big circles that spawn on the floor to get out of them as quickly as possible. Once she's down, she'll drop a mausoleum key, pick this up. Okay, the Praetor fight now. If you're close to the boss, he will do melee attacks against you. These do hurt a little bit. His sort of main bread and butter attack is where he fires out projectiles in a semicircle. These were going to hit you because there's so many of them, they do very little damage. In his more powerful abilities, he puts a beam out in front of him. This does damage. After a little while, this explodes outwards both left and right. If you cannot get to Draven himself, where you'll be safe, then get as far away from the beam as possible. Throughout the fight, Asiana will be in helping him. She does her big 4 circles attack. Do note that sometimes, which is a bit weird, she only casts 3. If you're particularly unlucky, you can sometimes get the circles and the beam at the same time, just causing a little more challenge. These are really all his abilities, and he is kinda the easier fight. Like in the other battle, drops a key on death. You're going to want to pick this up, and if this is the second fight, take a portal back to town instead of following the portal that gets given to you. Well, they're going to take the waypoint back to the cemetery. Talk to Lachlann, open the memorial gates, and head into the Memorial of the Lost. In this area, Lachlann the Lost realises that his whole family is dead. This trauma causes him to transform into Lachlann of Endless Lament, or Endless Sadness. During this phase, he grows almost 3 times in size and becomes a boss. Until I learnt this fight, I died so many times to him, so do pay attention. It is common when he transforms that he'll use his double slam immediately. This is where he slams the ground in front of him and then behind him. This is very badly telegraphed, and so I like to stay away from him at the very start of the fight. Also, in general, if you have to fight him at close range, stand behind him at all times, so at least you see the forward slam come down first. In a rarer form of his attack, he will slam the ground and send out a big cone shockwave in front of him. This does huge damage, but you can see it coming, so get out of the way. In general, you want him to chase you around the mausoleum to keep you safe. He has this like ghoul attack where he fires ghouls at you. These will actually be absorbed by the mausoleum and not actually trigger. The second of his ghoul attacks, he casts the ghouls on the ground. These will fly up in the air and then come down at the player. You do not want to be there when they land. In the last of his attacks, yet another ghoul one, they'll actually spiral around chasing you. When they hit you, they do a lot of damage, so just keep running if this happens. This was the only move he didn't use against me on this run. Go back to town and talk to Una. She'll use the ring to revive the Hooded One. With the Hooded One comes a special ability. He can identify all items in your inventory without having to use wisdom scrolls. This is a game changer. After selling everything, I realised that I actually dropped a really good quarterstaff which will help my character in the final fight. Unfortunately, I can't use it till 11. And that's a little bit disappointing because this next area is where the damage seems to ramp up against you. Enter the hunting grounds. Before we talk about the things to look out for in this area, let's talk about the difficulty. The encounters themselves in this area aren't that bad. What has changed is the monster density. It's a lot higher. There also seems to be way more rare mobs. I got really unlucky and got this one with a ring around it, and it was faster than I was, so I couldn't outrun it. This led me to die for the first time in the campaign, and while we're on the subject of death, let's talk about it a little bit. Death during the campaign is a real problem compared to in Path of Exile 1. In this game, when you die, any loot that drops on the floor will be gone. The monsters that you've already killed will have been replaced by new live ones. This means that death has a real potential to slow down your leveling, so you do really want to avoid it if you can. The last thing to know about this area is the red things with the yellow feathers are back, and they are so dangerous still. Also, take it slow. Don't run ahead and get loads of monsters following you that will then kill you. I don't know how I survived this at all. Okay, onto the places of interest, and there are several of them. Only one of them is in the centre of the arena. The rest are all around the edge. I do prefer to go around this area counterclockwise. The first thing I came across here is the entrance to the Ogham Farmlands. We're going to pop in, grab the waypoint, and come straight back out. For the next one, I find the 3 tree things raising the monster in the middle. This is completely optional, but it can drop decent loot. The next thing I find is the entrance to the Freythorn. Again, we're going to run in, grab the waypoint, and fight our way back out. If you see this kind of structure, then you know the area boss is nearby. Find the checkpoint and walk through the several gates to get to him. This boss is the Crowbell, named because soon he'll have a bell. I think he may also be a distant relative of Calandra. You definitely want to kill this boss because he gives you 2 passive skill points. In the first part of the fight where he's near his stone nest, he will slam the ground repeatedly. He can also do a leap slam and jump on your head. Both of these hurt like hell, so do avoid them. Once you drop his life down by about 20%, he'll move on to the next phase where he runs into the little gated area. When you first follow him into this area, he'll be trying to break down the door. He doesn't take any damage while he's doing this, so save your mana. His attacks are the same as in the previous phase, only now you're in a much smaller area, so you got to be really careful he doesn't land on you. Once you drop him to about 50% health, he will tear the bell off its stand and use it to smash the door to pieces. You can actually do some damage while he's in the doorway if you can stun him. Now what he's going to do is run into that little structure that told us he was around. Follow him in, and the moment you engage, the vines will seal the exit. His attacks from the previous phase are now replaced with these 2. The first is a heavy slam with the bell. This does quite a bit of damage and you really ought to avoid it. The second, he swings the bell around to try and hit you. He does this twice per move. This has never done a great deal of damage to me, so I don't think it's anything to worry about. Once he's down, pick up any loot, including the Book of Specialization. Use this in your inventory to grant 2 extra skill points. In the centre of the arena, you'll find a ritual encounter. I do tend to avoid this unless I happen to run into it. You'll find loads of ritual encounters in the Freythorn, which we'll talk about in a little while. But first, we're going to take the portal back to town, sell any stuff, get any upgrades, and then head back to the Ogham Farmlands. Even though the Freythorn is a lower area than the Ogham Farmlands, I find the Ogham Farmlands easier, so I want to get them out of the way first so I can get some more XP to do the Freythorn. And the Freythorn really isn't that bad apart from the boss at the end. That said, ritual encounters can be fairly rippy early on. Okay, so what do we do in this area? We're going to want to find the centre of the map. What you basically do is follow the path until you get blocked and then go through the fields to find the little farmhouses in the middle. One of these will have a checkpoint outside. You want to go in this hut. Once inside, you'll find Una's loot box. Open it and grab the loot. We'll get 2 extra skill points for handing this to Una when we go back to town. But first, head south to the bottom of the map. Be careful when running through fields of wheat. 1, because it's very naughty, and 2, because it makes monsters really hard to see. When running through a very particular field of wheat, you may come to a crop circle. Hang around here for a little while and a rare rabid dog will come in. This will drop good loot. Kill it. I even got a piece of chaos. This mutt really isn't that much of a problem. He does have circles on the ground which causes quite a bit of damage, so stay out of those. Apart from that, just hit him. Once he's down, head south until you find Ogham Village. Go in, grab the waypoint and head back to town. Hand in Una's loot for the 2 skill points. Onto the Freythorn now, and we're about to do a series of ritual encounters, 4 to be precise. Rituals work the same way they did in the original game. And for those of you who don't know, basically, when you get to a ritual, you attack the monsters around it. Once all the monsters are dead, you then go to the centre and touch the ritual altar. It will respawn all those monsters, and also any other monsters you've killed around rituals throughout the whole of the area. This means that each one becomes more difficult depending on how many came before. One of the rituals in this area will actually have a protective smoke around it. This means that it's the last one, so go and kill the other 3 before coming back to it. You can use the checkpoints to get back quickly. So while I run a few of these rituals before getting to the last one, let's talk a little bit about what you should do with regards to dealing with items you don't need. So for the first half of Act 1, you have 2 choices. You can either disenchant the items, or you can sell them. What I would suggest you do, at least at the very beginning, is to disenchant your items. Unless they're white, which means they can't be disenchanted, you can just sell those for a little bit of gold, and it will be a very small amount. Once you get sort of halfway through Act 2, then only disenchant rares and sell everything else. So when you disenchant magic items or blue items, you'll get transmute shards. 10 of these will create a transmute orb. And transmute orbs are the basis of crafting. You can use it to turn a white item into a magic item with 1 modifier. Disenchant a rare or yellow item and you'll get regal shards. If the item has 6 mods, you'll actually get 2 regal shards instead of 1. 10 of these convert to a regal orb, which converts a magical item to a rare item. And these are very useful for turning a piece of crap off the ground to something you can actually use in the early game. Do make sure you get both magic modifiers before upgrading with a regal. You do this using an alteration on top of the transmute you just used. Also, loot from vendors can be exceptionally good as a base, so do look at those before just picking up something off the ground. Okay, so you've seen me run a few rituals in the background. The problem with rituals is they're very swarmy, which means unless you're prepared when you get into the fight, they can overwhelm you and kill you. 2 tips to avoid this. If you use charges, make sure you get some charges before you start the ritual. This means you can use empowered skills to start off the ritual, which will give you a big advantage at the start. The second tip is don't stand still. Try and move around and have the monsters chase you. That will stop you getting stuck in a corner and killed. Getting stuck in a corner in this game is the biggest cause of death. Once you've defeated the 4th and final ritual, you'll summon the King of the Mist. He's a boss in this area and he's actually quite difficult. His first phase, however, is not that bad. He has 3 main attacks in his first phase. The first, he fires a really small projectile at you. It's chaos damage. Doesn't seem to do a lot. The next thing, he slams the ground and creates a cone in front of him of spikes at the ground. This damages me for about 25% of life, so you do want to avoid it. And the last thing he does is create these big patches of damage over time. Do avoid standing on this, it will sap your life. Once you take his life down to 1/4 or 25%, he'll go into an invulnerability phase and start to regen all his life and his energy shield. Once he's back to full power, he becomes vulnerable again, although now he has some new abilities. The first one you'll see is this red light, green light from Squid Games. The icon on the left hand side of the screen is split into 2 halves. On the left hand side, if it's green, it means keep moving. If it's red, it means stop moving. Failing to do this will cause you to be stunned for quite a while. Whilst he's doing this, he tends to be weaving a large chaos ball which he's about to throw at you. If you actually get stunned by red light, green light, you'll be hit by this chaos ball for a very large amount of damage, which will probably almost kill you. He also introduces some purple damage over time things on the floor that move around and kinda chase you. It's really unpleasant. So the key thing in the second part of the fight is to dodge all the chaos things flying around the arena. This is easier said than done. And at the same time, keep an eye out for the icons on the left hand side of the screen which tells you that you need to stand still or keep moving. I'm of the opinion that the best way to deal with this fight is to just get a really strong weapon or a good friend to come in and batter him really quickly. But if you don't have a good weapon and you don't have good friends, then maybe you're just going to have to slog it out. Once he's down, he'll drop the Gembloom Skull. Clicking on this in your inventory will give you 30 spirit. It will also give you an uncut spirit gem. You can use this to get your first aura, either offensive or defensive. I'm going for Herald of Ice for the nice explosions. Now we're going to go back to town, sell any stuff, pick up any quests, and we're going to head over to Ogham Village. Just a note on your spirit gem you just cut. It doesn't work like other gems, i.e. you can't put it on your taskbar. Instead, you've got to go into the skill pane, right click the little logo, it'll start spinning, which means it's now active. And when you're not in town, you will be getting the buff. Another note on gems, if I may, in case you missed it. I did my first run through. Gems in this game do not auto level with you. Instead, you've got to level them by applying a gem of a higher level and cutting it into the same gem. If you don't keep on top of this, you will become massively underpowered. Trust me, it's bad. Now, if this is your first run of the league, there is a special quest in this area. You won't see it after you've run it the first time, so I can't show you it. But somewhere in this area, there is a blacksmith's shed. There'll be a checkpoint outside. Go inside and grab the blacksmith's tools. Take these to Renly in town, and he'll unlock the salvaging bench. The salvaging bench allows you to take any items with quality or with a socket on them and convert them to a shard for that particular item. I actually save up any such items in my stash until this unlocks. This stuff's like gold dust and you want to maximize it. Anyway, I digress. On the right hand side of the map for Ogham Village, about halfway down, you will find an exit onto the Courtyard of Death. It has the tagline, "The air sings as the axe swings," which is delightful. This will lead you to the Executioner, and you'll get to him just in time to see him in action in his trade. Once he's finished the all off with his head thing, he'll notice you and jump down to fight you. Apart from swinging his axe, this guy has 3 really heavy abilities. They're all telegraphed with the exclamation sound. The first attack and the most dangerous is he'll slam his axe against the ground, sharp end down. At the same time saying something along the lines of guillotine, you'll see a small cloud on the ground and then the guillotine will fall. Every time I've been hit by this attack, I have died. His second and third attacks are pretty much similar. In the second one, he will actually hit the ground with his axe and create a shockwave outwards. It's a bit like Earthquake. And in the second variant, he'll actually just hit a large sunder wave towards you. Both of these are really unforgiving and can kill you, so be careful. Once you finally get him down, go up onto the guillotine steps and release the lady by clicking the switch. You're going to want to follow her back to town because she will give you a level 5 uncut skill gem as the quest reward, which gives most players a really strong skill to fight the end boss with. And for the end boss, you're going to need all the help you can get. Or you'll be fine with this guide because I'm that good. Hint, I'm not. Okay, so once you got the level 5 skill gem from Lettuce, I think she's called Lettuce, cut it and then take the waypoint to the Manor Ramparts. This will have newly appeared on your map. Once in this area, we always go left first. It's the only way to go. The right will take you completely the wrong way. And then you want to follow the road around, killing all the monsters. Now, most of these monsters will leave like a blood pool on the ground, which will do damage over time. Try not to stand in it. From now on, it's really simple. Just hug the wall all the way around till you get towards the top of the map, and you'll come to the manor. You'll know you're on the right tracks when you pass a checkpoint near the gallows. This place look familiar? Anyway, once you get to the manor, just enter, grab the waypoint and the checkpoint. This area has about 3 or 4 floors, I think it's 3. The top floor and the bottom floor are the most important of all. The others are just filler floors. On most of the floors, if not all of them, there'll be a little treasure room. This is a little room through a door where there'll be coins on the floor. There's probably not enough coins to justify the detour. Halfway through each floor, you'll find this area with the broken floor, looking right down to the bottom floor where the Count of Ogham lives. On the first floor, when you first pass this, shortly thereafter, you'll find like a church type thing. There'll be a checkpoint. This is called the Chapel of the Fallen. Towards the front of the chapel, you'll find the Psalm of Weakness. This is a statue, or is it? Reading the plaque will release the monster and it'll start to move. Candles will light on its back. This monster does heavy fire damage in front of him. And the in front of him is really important because you want to stand behind him at all times. Providing you do this, none of his attacks will hit you. You'll be absolutely fine. Once he falls, he'll drop Candlemas's essence. This gives you 20 free life points. From here, you just continue until you reach the bottom floor. There'll be a lift on the sort of second floor right down into the fight. And just a note of this area, just like the last one, some of the monsters that die will leave the damage over time bubbles on the floor. It's really unpleasant. Don't stand on it. Once we get to the bottom room, this is the arena for the final fight of the act. You can use the 4 or 5 adds that are in this room to start with to actually get up some power charges or whatever charges you use if you use them. Do note that if you lose the fight, the second time round these adds will not be here. Okay, the Count of Ogham fight. You want to go to the centre of the arena and he'll jump down to meet you. In the first phase of the fight, there's going to be lots of flashy sword swinging. And who needs that when all you need is one good stab? And that's exactly what you'll get from his first telegraph hit. He lunges forward and tries to stab you. This attack doesn't seem to cause excessive damage, but then I do dodge it most of the time. And the problem with this fight is, every time you get hit, you're going to want to use a life flask, and when you use your life flasks, you're going to run out before the end of the fight. Periodically, the Count will transform into a wolf, and in this form he will charge at you. He'll also phase out into this red flame, and then a big red circle will appear on the ground. Be ready to get out of the circle as quickly as possible. It does massive damage, and it's not there for very long, so you have to be ready to act. Back to flashy sword swinging now, and one of his attacks is this huge sweep, where he covers half the arena with 180 degrees of sword. He can also do a large V attack, creating 2 walls of ice at either side of you. He then slams his sword down in the middle, shattering all the ice and doing massive damage. The idea here is to really get out of the back of the V so you don't get hit by the explosions, or completely avoid the V in the first place by combat rolling as he does it. But at this point I'm kinda stuck, and the V's up against the wall so I can't get out the back, so I'm gonna take damage. Once you get him down to about 10% of HP, he will permanently transform into his wolf form and completely regen all life back to full. This is where things get a little interesting. Every so often throughout this phase, he'll create a large circle of fog around the edge of the arena. He'll then disappear into it and spawn loads of adds into the centre. These adds are actually really beefy, and there's a good chance of being swarmed. I actually hate this section of the fight, it's the worst. And that's why you really want to kill this boss quick, because it cuts down these number of phases. All throughout this fog phase, he is taunting you from the outskirts of the fight. Each time his voice line finishes, he will charge through the centre of the arena and try and do damage to you. I am absolutely woeful at dodging this, but it can be done with a well-timed dodge roll. After what seems like an eternity, he will jump into the centre of the arena again, and the fog will dissipate. One of his common repeated moves is to phase out and come back in the big red circle thing. As part of his new move toolset, he will raise his sword into the air and summon down beams of cold. If these beams of cold hit you, then there is a good chance you're going to get frozen, which means the next beam will probably hit you and then the next. As soon as you see the sword go up, you want to break off attacks and just dodge these beams. In another one of these new attacks, he'll slam his sword into the ground and cold crystals will start to form on the surface. You will only take damage from this if you're actually stood on a cold crystal when he pulls the sword out of the ground. So if you can still get damage in while not standing on one of these, then you can continue the fight. In another one of his signature moves, he will say the word desolation and then shoot a stream of ice crystals from his mouth. You want to make sure while he's doing this, you're stood at the side doing as much damage as possible. Do note that this can freeze you. It's also good to have anti-cold or an anti-freeze charm in your belt at this point. As well as the cold beams from the sky, he also has these red beams from the sky. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is here because these can freeze you as well. In some odd cases, these can also fall in the arena during the fog phase, which is really off-putting. Inevitably, providing you don't die, he will lose all his hit points. And at this point, the Hooded One will swoop in to ask him a load of questions and put him out of his misery. This is the end of the fight, and once he's finished asking his questions, you can join him back in town, say goodbye to the locals, and then head off into Act 2. This video really did take an age to put together, involving a ton of runs of Act 1. If you found this video useful and would like to see more Act guides, then please let me know by leaving a like or a comment. And with that, thanks for watching, and may the RNG be with you.